Let's talk honestly. Not emotionally, not dramatically, but educationally. When a man ignores you, the first thing most women do is turn the blame inward. Did I say too much? Did I care too deeply? Was I not enough? But education teaches us something very important. Behavior is communication. Ignoring someone is not a sign of confidence, control, or superiority. It is often a sign of internal conflict. A man does not ignore a woman because she lacks value. He ignores her because he does not know how to handle the value she brings. This speech is not about chasing, manipulating, or proving your worth. This is about understanding human psychology, emotional dynamics, and why silence exposes weakness, not strength. Once you understand this, you stop reacting emotionally, and you start moving intelligently. A man who ignores you wants you to believe he has power. But real power does not need silence to survive. In psychology, ignoring is known as avoidant behavior. It appears when a person feels overwhelmed, threatened, or emotionally unequipped. A secure man communicates. An emotionally grounded man explains. An emotionally mature man does not disappear, he addresses. So when a man ignores you, the greatest weakness he reveals is this: he lacks emotional regulation. He does not know how to sit with discomfort. He does not know how to process feelings. He does not know how to communicate vulnerability without feeling exposed. That is not strength. That is fear wearing a mask. Another weakness is loss of emotional leadership. A man who ignores stops leading the emotional direction of the connection. He hands control over to silence, and silence always creates distance. And distance kills connection. Ignoring someone is often mistaken for strength, confidence, or emotional control. But when examined through an educational and psychological lens, it becomes clear that this behavior is rooted in emotional avoidance rather than power. True power in human interaction comes from the ability to communicate clearly, manage emotions effectively, and remain present even when situations feel uncomfortable. Ignoring, on the other hand, is an escape response. It allows a person to avoid feelings they do not know how to process or conversations they do not know how to handle. Emotional avoidance is a well-documented psychological defense mechanism. When a man ignores, it is usually because engaging would require vulnerability, honesty, or accountability. Communication forces a person to acknowledge emotions, make decisions, and take responsibility for how their actions affect others. For someone who lacks emotional maturity or regulation, this can feel overwhelming. Silence then becomes a temporary refuge, a way to reduce internal tension without actually solving the underlying issue. From an educational standpoint, emotional regulation is the cornerstone of healthy behavior. A person who is emotionally regulated can pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively or disappear entirely. Ignoring signals the opposite. It suggests difficulty tolerating emotional discomfort. Instead of processing feelings such as confusion, fear of intimacy, or fear of conflict, the individual withdraws. This withdrawal may look calm on the surface, but internally it is often driven by anxiety and uncertainty. Attachment theory further explains why ignoring is a common pattern for some men. Individuals with avoidant attachment styles tend to value independence to an extreme degree and feel threatened by emotional closeness. When a connection deepens or expectations increase, their instinct is to pull away. Ignoring becomes a method of regaining perceived control. However, this control is fragile. It relies on distance rather than strength, and collapses once emotional consequences emerge. Another critical factor is emotional literacy. Many people were never taught how to identify and express emotions in healthy ways. When a man ignores instead of communicating, it often reflects a limited emotional vocabulary. He may experience discomfort, pressure, or inner conflict, but lack the language to explain it. Silence becomes the easiest option, not because it is effective, but because it requires the least emotional effort. This lack of skill is not a moral failure, but it is a weakness in emotional development. Ignoring also reveals a fear of accountability. Clear communication leads to clarity, and clarity demands decisions. Decisions require ownership. When someone ignores, they delay defining the relationship, setting boundaries, or admitting uncertainty. This keeps them in a position of ambiguity where they do not have to commit or confront. Educational psychology shows that avoidance reduces short-term stress but increases long-term anxiety. The unresolved situation lingers in the mind, often resurfacing as restlessness, irritability, or emotional detachment. Healthy relationships depend on responsiveness. Responsiveness communicates respect, safety, and emotional availability. When responsiveness disappears, trust erodes. Ignoring disrupts the emotional rhythm between two people. It leaves one side confused and the other emotionally disconnected. Over time, this imbalance weakens the bond. What initially appears as emotional control gradually becomes emotional distance, and distance diminishes connection. It is important to understand that ignoring does not stop emotions, it only suppresses them. Suppressed emotions do not disappear, they accumulate. Eventually, they manifest as coldness, resentment, or sudden emotional withdrawal. This is why individuals who rely on ignoring often struggle to maintain deep, lasting relationships. Their avoidance prevents the emotional repair that every human connection requires. Educational research consistently shows that emotional strength is demonstrated through engagement, not disappearance. Addressing issues, expressing boundaries, and communicating honestly are signs of maturity. Ignoring avoids growth. It keeps a person emotionally stagnant, repeating the same patterns without resolution. While silence may feel powerful in the moment, it ultimately limits emotional intelligence and relational success. For the person being ignored, understanding this dynamic is crucial. The behavior is not a reflection of their worth or value. It is a reflection of the other person's internal limitations. Recognizing ignoring as emotional avoidance shifts the narrative from self-blame to clarity. It allows one to respond with self-respect rather than emotional reaction. In conclusion, ignoring is not a strategy of strength, but a symptom of emotional avoidance. It signals difficulty with vulnerability, communication, and accountability. True power lies in emotional presence, clarity, and the courage to face discomfort directly. When viewed educationally, ignoring is not something to chase or fear. It is information. It reveals where emotional growth has stopped and where responsibility is being avoided. When a man ignores you, it is easy to assume that he feels superior, uninterested, or emotionally detached, but education and psychology reveal a deeper reality. In many cases, the behavior is driven not by confidence, but by insecurity. Insecurity does not always look like weakness on the surface. Often it disguises itself as indifference, silence, or emotional distance. A man who ignores may appear calm and unbothered, but internally he is often struggling with feelings he does not fully understand or cannot comfortably face. Insecurity develops when a person doubts their own emotional adequacy. This can stem from past experiences such as rejection, emotional neglect, failed relationships, or environments where expressing feelings was discouraged. When emotional situations arise, insecurity triggers self-protective behavior. Instead of engaging and risking emotional exposure, the individual retreats. Ignoring becomes a way to avoid situations that might reveal perceived flaws, fears, or emotional vulnerability. From an educational perspective, insecurity is closely linked to self-worth regulation. A secure individual has an internal sense of value that does not depend heavily on external validation. An insecure individual, however, often relies on distance or control to protect their ego. When a man ignores, it may be because engaging would place him in a position where he feels evaluated, needed, or emotionally responsible. These positions can activate fears of inadequacy, fear of disappointing, or fear of losing control. Psychologically, insecurity often coexists with avoidance. Avoidance allows a person to temporarily escape feelings of vulnerability. By ignoring, a man reduces immediate emotional pressure. He does not have to explain himself, make decisions, or confront expectations. This avoidance gives a short-term sense of relief, but it does not resolve the insecurity. Instead, it reinforces it. Each time avoidance is used, emotional confidence weakens further, making future communication even more difficult. Another important factor is fear of emotional dependency. Insecure individuals often struggle with the idea of being emotionally needed or emotionally attached. They may associate closeness with loss of independence or loss of control. When a woman expresses interest, care, or emotional openness, it can trigger an internal conflict. On one side, there is attraction and connection. On the other side, there is fear of vulnerability. Ignoring becomes a way to reduce this internal tension without having to choose between the two. Educational research on masculinity and social conditioning also plays a role. Many men grow up learning that emotional expression is a weakness. They are taught to suppress feelings rather than understand them. As adults, this suppression does not eliminate emotions. It creates confusion around them. When emotional situations arise, insecurity surfaces because the individual lacks the tools to navigate them. Ignoring becomes a learned response, not because it is healthy, but because it feels familiar and safe. Insecurity also affects communication patterns. A confident man communicates boundaries, intentions, and concerns directly. An insecure man often fears saying the wrong thing, making the wrong choice, or revealing uncertainty. Silence feels safer than honesty. By ignoring, he avoids the risk of being misunderstood or judged. However, this silence often causes more misunderstanding than communication ever would. It is also important to understand that insecurity can create a false sense of control. When a man ignores, he may feel that he is controlling the situation by withholding attention. In reality, this control is fragile and temporary. Emotional control that relies on distance is not sustainable. Over time, it leads to disconnection, loss of trust, and emotional imbalance. The insecurity that motivated the behavior remains unresolved and often intensifies. For the person being ignored, this behavior can feel deeply personal. Education helps separate perception from reality. A man's insecurity is not caused by a woman's worth, behavior, or value. It exists independently. Ignoring does not mean you are unimportant. It often means you matter enough to trigger emotions he is not prepared to handle. Understanding this prevents unnecessary self-doubt and emotional overextension. Insecure behavior also limits emotional growth. When avoidance becomes habitual, it prevents the development of emotional resilience. Each avoided conversation is a missed opportunity to build confidence in communication. Over time, the man may find himself repeating the same patterns across different relationships, unable to form deep or stable connections. The insecurity remains the common thread. From an educational standpoint, emotional strength is built through engagement, not withdrawal. Facing discomfort, expressing uncertainty, and learning from emotional experiences strengthens self-confidence. Ignoring does the opposite. It keeps insecurity intact and reinforces fear-based behavior. While it may look composed on the outside, it reflects unresolved internal struggle. In conclusion, a man who ignores is often battling insecurity rather than demonstrating power. His silence is not proof of emotional superiority but evidence of internal conflict. Recognizing this allows for a clearer, more grounded understanding of the behavior. It shifts the focus away from self-blame and toward emotional awareness. Insecurity thrives in silence, but growth begins with understanding. Silence is often misunderstood as emotional strength, maturity, or self-control. But when examined carefully through an educational and psychological perspective, silence used in relationships frequently functions as a defense mechanism. A defense mechanism is an unconscious strategy people use to protect themselves from emotional discomfort, fear, or perceived threats. When a man becomes silent instead of communicating, it is rarely because he is emotionally strong. More often, it is because he is emotionally overwhelmed and does not know how to engage without feeling exposed. Emotional strength involves the ability to face difficult conversations, manage internal reactions, and express thoughts clearly even when emotions are intense. Silence avoids all three. It removes the need to explain, clarify, or take responsibility. While this avoidance may feel stabilizing in the moment, it does not reflect resilience. It reflects emotional self-protection. The individual chooses distance over engagement to reduce internal stress rather than address the source of that stress. Psychologically, silence as a defense mechanism often emerges in response to fear. Fear of conflict is a major driver. Some individuals associate disagreement with rejection or emotional harm, when a conversation has the potential to lead to conflict. Silence feels safer than risk. Another common fear is fear of vulnerability. Communication requires openness, and openness creates the possibility of being misunderstood, judged, or emotionally hurt. Silence appears to eliminate that risk, even though it only postpones it. Another educational explanation for silence is emotional flooding. Emotional flooding occurs when a person feels overwhelmed by emotions to the point where thinking and communicating clearly become difficult. In such moments, withdrawing may initially be necessary to self-regulate. However, when silence becomes a habitual response rather than a temporary pause, it signals a lack of emotional processing skills. The person is not pausing to reflect, they are disappearing to avoid. Silence can also serve as a control strategy, but this control is defensive rather than confident. By staying silent, a man may feel he is protecting himself from making mistakes or revealing uncertainty. This is particularly common in individuals who fear losing status or authority. They believe that speaking may weaken their position. Educational psychology shows that this belief is rooted in insecurity, not leadership. True leadership involves clarity and accountability, not withdrawal. From a relational perspective, silence disrupts emotional connection. Human relationships rely on feedback loops of communication. When one person expresses and the other responds, trust and understanding grow. Silence breaks this loop. It leaves emotions unacknowledged and intentions unclear. Over time, this creates emotional distance and erodes relational safety. The silent person may feel protected, but the relationship becomes unstable. Another critical aspect of silence as a defense mechanism is emotional suppression. Suppression is the act of pushing emotions out of conscious awareness. While this may reduce immediate discomfort, suppressed emotions do not disappear. They accumulate internally and often resurface later. Irritability, detachment, or sudden emotional withdrawal. This is why prolonged silence rarely leads to resolution. It only delays emotional processing. Educational research also highlights the role of learned behavior. Many individuals grow up in environments where silence was modeled as a response to conflict. They learned that expressing emotions led to criticism or punishment, while staying quiet maintained peace. As adults, they continue this pattern unconsciously. Silence feels familiar and safe, even when it damages relationships. This learned defense becomes automatic unless consciously addressed. It is also important to distinguish between healthy silence and avoidance silence. Healthy silence is intentional and followed by communication. It is used to reflect, regulate emotions, and return with clarity. Avoidant silence, however, has no intention of resolution. It creates emotional ambiguity and leaves issues unresolved. Educationally, the difference lies in intention and outcome. Avoidant silence protects the individual at the cost of connection. For the person experiencing the silence, understanding its defensive nature is empowering. It clarifies that the silence is not a sign of emotional superiority or indifference. It is a sign of emotional limitation. This understanding helps prevent overinterpretation and emotional self-blame. Instead of chasing clarity from someone who is emotionally withdrawn, one can respond with self-respect and boundaries. Ultimately, silence as a defense mechanism reflects emotional self-preservation, not emotional strength. It prioritizes avoiding discomfort over fostering understanding. True emotional strength is demonstrated through presence, communication, and accountability. When silence replaces dialogue, it signals fear, not confidence. Education allows us to see silence not as power, but as a protective response that reveals where emotional growth is still needed. One of the most overlooked truths in emotional dynamics is that a man's greatest weakness often appears at the exact moment he believes he is in control. When a man ignores a woman, he may assume that withholding attention protects his position or increases his power. In reality, the deepest weakness revealed in this behavior is that he slowly loses access to a woman's emotional energy. Emotional energy is the foundation of connection, attachment, and influence. Once that energy is withdrawn, the balance of power shifts in ways he rarely anticipates. Emotional energy refers to attention, care, responsiveness, and emotional presence. When a woman invests emotionally, she brings warmth, curiosity, patience, and engagement into the connection. This energy fuels communication and emotional bonding. When a man ignores her, he interrupts this exchange. At first, he may believe nothing has changed. However, emotionally intelligent understanding shows that when emotional energy is repeatedly unmet, it naturally begins to retreat. This withdrawal is not intentional manipulation. It is a protective response. Educational psychology explains that humans subconsciously adjust effort based on emotional feedback. When effort is not reciprocated, the mind reduces emotional investment to restore internal balance. A woman does not stop caring because she stops feeling. She stops caring because her emotional system learns that giving no longer feels safe or valued. This is where the man's weakness begins. He does not notice the shift immediately because emotional withdrawal is often quiet. As emotional energy pulls back, something important changes. The woman becomes less reactive, less expressive, and less emotionally available. She no longer seeks validation, clarity, or reassurance from him. This shift is often misinterpreted as acceptance or emotional detachment. In reality, it is the beginning of emotional independence. The man may feel relieved at first, believing the silence worked. But what he fails to understand is that emotional independence eventually eliminates emotional attachment. From an educational standpoint, attachment weakens when emotional engagement decreases. Relationships thrive on mutual emotional contribution. When one person repeatedly withholds, the other adapts by investing elsewhere, often in personal growth, self-respect, and emotional boundaries. Once a woman redirects her emotional energy back to herself, the dynamic fundamentally changes. The man no longer holds emotional influence over her internal state. This loss of emotional access becomes the man's greatest weakness because emotional connection cannot be demanded or forced. It can only be invited and maintained. When emotional energy is gone, attempts to re-engage often feel empty or ineffective. The same silence that once created distance now creates absence. The woman is no longer waiting for a response. She is no longer emotionally paused. She has moved forward internally. Educational studies on emotional detachment show that people often realize loss after emotional separation has already occurred. Physical presence or occasional communication may still exist, but emotional access is gone. This delayed awareness is why ignoring backfires. By the time the man senses the change, the emotional bond has already weakened. The power he believed he held through silence dissolves because emotional influence no longer exists. Another important aspect is emotional reciprocity. Emotional energy thrives in environments where it is acknowledged and valued. When ignored, emotional expression slowly shuts down. A woman becomes more selective about where she invests emotionally. This selectivity is not punishment, it is self-preservation. Once she experiences emotional peace without him, returning to emotional uncertainty feels unnecessary. This is also where the man's internal struggle intensifies. The absence of emotional energy creates discomfort, curiosity, and sometimes regret. He may attempt to reinitiate contact, not because he has suddenly become emotionally aware, but because he feels the shift in power. However, emotional energy cannot be reactivated on demand. It responds to safety, consistency, and respect. Without these, reconnection remains shallow. From an educational lens, the greatest weakness lies in misunderstanding how emotional value works. Attention given freely is not unlimited. Emotional energy responds to how it is treated. Ignoring communicates that emotional presence is not valued. Over time, the emotional system responds by conserving resources. When the woman stops investing emotionally, she regains internal stability. The man, however, experiences the absence as loss. Ultimately, a man who ignores underestimates the strength of emotional self-respect. The moment a woman stops pouring emotional energy into someone who does not reciprocate, she regains clarity and control. This is not a game or strategy, it is a natural psychological response. The greatest weakness of a man who ignores is that he teaches a woman how to live without his emotional presence. Once she learns that, silence no longer holds power. As we come to the end of this message, understand this clearly and calmly. Knowledge changes how you respond to life. When you understand emotional behavior, you stop reacting from pain and start moving from clarity. A man who ignores you does not hold power over you unless you give that power through confusion, self-doubt, or emotional overinvestment. The moment you replace emotion with understanding, everything shifts. You no longer chase answers. You no longer personalize, silence. You observe, you learn, and you protect your emotional space. This content is not about blaming men or glorifying distance. It is about educating women to recognize emotional patterns so they can make healthier choices. Emotional awareness is not weakness. It is strength. When you understand why someone behaves the way they do, you stop trying to fix them and start choosing what is best for you. And that is where real confidence is built. If this message resonated with you, it means you are growing emotionally. It means you are learning to see behavior for what it is, not what you hoped it would be. And growth like this deserves consistency. That is why this channel exists, to help you think clearly, protect your emotional energy, and build relationships based on self-respect rather than emotional exhaustion. If you want more educational psychology-based content that empowers women to understand emotional dynamics, relationship behavior, and self-worth, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Subscribing is not just clicking a button. It is choosing to invest in your mindset. It is choosing clarity over confusion and self-respect over emotional chaos. Also, don't forget to like this video if it helped you gain perspective. Your support helps this message reach more women who may be silently questioning their worth because of someone else's behavior. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Sometimes understanding is the first step toward healing. Stay connected, stay aware, and remember this: the right people do not make you question your value through silence. Keep choosing yourself, keep learning, and keep growing. I'll see you in the next video.